There it is.
All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Empire Show. It's me and Ari. This is our, kind of the best showcase of our new format tonight. So, please ask us any questions and challenges, of course. But me and Ari are going to get into let's call it somewhat sensitive subject, if not outright controversial. I think the DC versus DCC is probably more controversial than the DCC, but here we're going to talk about commercial versus do-it-yourself solutions. I hope that we can show, and I can show when we get to some of the more do-it-yourself or DIY kind of solutions, that it's not an all or nothing solution, that some commercial components, so we hope to open your eyes to some of the flexibility or choices and range of options that are out there. Of course, that may just be different choices of commercial products that are supported. There's a reason for that argument for sure, but that there is an opportunity for you to possibly do some items as do-it-yourselves for one-off solutions. So Ari has a commercial system, and he's taken it from that perspective, and I think it's a valid reason to have a supportable product, etc. So Ari's going to give us the rundown on why he chose to go a commercial solution, what commercial solution he went through, and kind of his, his side of the controversy of that choice. So, so give it to us, Ari. Lay it out in a way that I can't make it controversial.
So in 2006, probably shortly after Christmas, with some tax money and some Christmas money, I bought the Zephyr system. It's right over my shoulder. I've had the system for now 14 years. And at the time, I had all DC stuff. And this system runs DC. So I was able to run with what I had. And as I started, buying more and more, I stopped buying DC locomotives and started buying some DCC. And I was using Cato Track at the time. And I realized that Cato switches are power routed.
Yeah.
So when I had a big yard, my system cut out. Like I didn't have power to all my tracks. I had to get a lot more wiring. But this system is technology forward. So right now it runs on Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi didn't come out till I think 2 years ago. I have my system, which is right over my head here. I want to get that as high as possible so you can get the signal. Up until last year, that system sat in the center of my layout, and I had to operate based on the center run back and forth. When that new piece of hardware came out, I didn't have to buy and upgrade my system. It was plugged in, ready to rock and roll, and I don't have any throttles per se. I use old cell phones. So the technology grows with time. And if this system ever went out, I bought it on sale for $191. It was originally like $230, $240 when it came out. To replace this today, it's $170. And it was like the single greatest thing I did for my railroad to like enhance my enjoyment. You can add components with it, so you don't have to buy everything at once. You can have like $100, $200 startup cost, and then as your layout grows, like with my layout, I was like, oh, I need a return loop. So what do? I bought an AR1. I didn't have to invent it. I didn't have to figure out the wiring. I put 2 wires into my system right here. I still have a bunch of it. So that's 22 solid strand. And just plug 2 wires in the track. My turnouts connect right to my bus line. Power turnouts, push them. I bought my turnouts 2 years ago. So we're talking on a system that's 14 years old. The technology is that far forward that all these components I can slowly add on. So you don't have a big upfront cost. You can slowly expand and grow. And it comes with a warranty. And it's supported by tech users. And I didn't have to figure it out. I literally bought it, put it out of the box, and put 2 wires into it. And my whole world changed. My model railroad world changed at that point in time. It has a separate decoding or a program track, and you can put your locomotive on it. You can, punch your address in, and you can do all your programming on that. And the other great thing about not figuring it out yourself is it comes with directions. You don't have to learn how to computer code to get your railroad to work. And with it being DC compatible and DCC compatible, I didn't have to buy all new stuff. I could use the stuff I had and still enjoy it. And as the hobby progressed in me, it moved with me. And if this ever burns out, I'll probably buy another one because it runs 20 locomotives. And I'm just one dude. I got a decent sized N-scale layout, but I haven't maxed that out yet. If I get 3 or 4 operators and they bring their cell phones, I don't even have to buy remotes. They can come over and operate because if they're railroad guys, they probably already have, engine driver on their phone. And if they don't, I got another cell phone. I got 2 throttles sitting right here. My primary phone, and I have my phone right here. That's my railroad phone. It's my old phone. I just brought it to the basement, and it stays down here. I got a USB cable right there hanging down to power it. It never leaves my railroad. And new throttles I think are anywhere from like $100 to $200. Most DC systems has a starter set, and then they have the next level would be your club or very large layout. And some of the new NCEs and DCC stuff, anywhere from like $300 to $400 for a big club set. The new Digitrax now has upgraded a lot of their programs. I was doing research before the show this morning, and they have all new products for 2020. And they have route configurations in a system like this that you can say throw all these switches, and then your train starts and finishes on a route. So if people that are really into using, what's the program? For
JMRI or
JMRI. If you're into JMRI, the new Zephyr, not the new Zephyr system, but one of the newer, bigger models has it already in. They have radial throttles. They have infrared, and you can buy and just plug into your line or plug into your what they call it, LocoNet cable. I don't have a local cat on this. All my stuff runs right off my bus, and I've had no trouble with it. The components have, when I decide to put a signal system on, I'll probably go Digitrax and I'll plug it right in. So it grows with you. I don't have to learn computer code. I don't have to do any soldering. It's fully supported, and it's pretty much, if you need to save up a little bit of money and get your system. If you're hesitant and you say, all I have is DC locomotives, you can still use this, and this will actually act as a third throttle. So if you have 2 power packs, that'll be a third, and you can also consist with DC on this, which I didn't know until I've had the system for 14 years and didn't even know that. So you can consist with DC with this system and run, a double header or a triple header train as long as they're fairly matched in speed. So that's my stance.
Ari Gert's asking, what did you do to have to add Wi-Fi?
So my wife bought me this for Christmas. It's $60 to $80, and it's a Digitrax LNWI, and the local net cable plugs into the base of it, and it's the black wire that goes up to right there. So at the highest point in your room, it probably could go a little bit higher, because if I have my phone low by my belly, my backdrop will block the signal a little bit, and I'll have a little bit of trouble. So the higher you can get with that little device, which is it's a Wi-Fi transmitter, the better it is. I had a buddy that had an NCE power cab system. It was like $700-800, maybe $900 when he bought this thing, 15, 16 years ago. And he had a lot of trouble with it. He bought it had the radio antennas, and he built his layout in his basement with walls. And you turn a corner and the signal would drop and your trains would just take off. And he had a lot of trouble with that. So he would have these big 16-person operations down there, and something would go haywire and all the trains would just take off. And I was like, I don't want to deal with that. I want something simpler. And I knew I'd never have a layout of that size. So I went with the Zephyr, and I haven't outgrown it yet. And I got at least 21 locomotives on my layout right now that I run all the time.
So, and I think the Zephyr, there's a lot of these entry systems that are.
Uh-oh. We kick Andy out. There we go.
Make somebody out. That's all right. That's all right. We can work with it. So we changed my cameras around to show you guys some of the things I'm not at all opposed to. Let's start with that concession. I've got a bunch of things out here, so I'm going to show you some fundamentals, some things, and I think the key to this thing is choice. That's my big concession is to encourage you to have some to explore some choices. So first is, regardless of what JMRI or regardless of what DCC system you choose a commercial system. Not a problem. It's commercially supported, etc. I started out kind of in the same place as Ari was, with the intention of just using devices. I didn't like using my phone per se because it's too large for one-handed operation, but these iPod touches are just great for that. Although there are some reasons, even though I'm an Apple guy, I tend to think that the Android engine driver is probably a better application, at least at this point. However, with the advent and popularization of the proto throttle, and this is not for everybody. This is probably for a few percentage of modelers, but if you're interested in operations, the proto throttle, I think, is a godsend. It has changed my thinking on operations or on the electronics. It is irrelevant to me what system you use because this is how I'm going to interact with it. So I don't care. It's irrelevant. All it is a glorified power pack that puts some digital signal in there. However, you're ultimately going to do some part of this DIY, do it yourself, regardless of what system you choose. If you choose a NCE power cab or their primary system or the full Digitrax system with all of that stuff, you still have to buy a regular computer, install MRI, hook up the devices, commercial or otherwise, get the software connected and make it do its job. There is no buy it and it all just works if you're going to do anything beyond the most basic of plug up the DCC, pick up the throttle that came with your system and twist the knob. Especially if you're going to do things like the proto throttles or something, yes, you're going to be doing a little bit of configuration. These are custom or they're commercial products, but you're going to do some configuration yourself. However, if you're going to use wireless throttles, you've got to think about how much networking gear you need. And your basic wireless that comes on your modem from your ISP or your router from your ISP is very likely going to leave you dissatisfied if you do anything more than the most basic, a couple phones controlling the trains. The moment you start connecting up devices with Wi-Fi, these are the devices I use to control turnouts and signal masts, and things like that. These are a commercially available product that are super handy. It's called a sawed-off. These are super cheap. You can tie an LED strip to these. Again, this is not DIY. It's a commercial product, but you can hook an LED strip to this, hook it to your Wi-Fi, and JMRI can speak to this thing. Yes, it requires a little bit of effort on your part, But the JMRI Fast Clock can control your LED strips with a product that you don't have to solder yourself. This is what the inside of this is the inside of it. I strip them apart out of the boxes so that I can integrate them with the rest of my hardware. So there are those choices. So it's not that the only choice in the DIY versus DIY debate is whether you're going to build your own DCC command station. There's a whole lot of other considerations. And back to my primary point, if you're going to run JMRI, and for me, in my personal interest, I have no interest in running an operational model railroad without using JMRI, at least Decoder Pro. You get your money's worth out of Decoder Pro, and it's worth the trouble of doing whatever it takes to get the JNWI or whatever type of device it requires for you to get an interface between JMRI and your layout so that you can use Decoder Pro. That is a godsend to our hobby that you can just click and drag and poke around. This is Decoder Pro running here. On this system, it's awesome, and you get your money's worth out of it, especially since the software is free. All the additional things that you get out of JMRI, from switch list based operations to the JMRI warrant system that would allow you to automate one or more of your trains. Granted, if you want to fully operate your railroad, probably train controller from Railroading Company is probably a better product or a fully operated display layout or museum layout or something. But for me, I want to automate a few trains throughout the operating session so I can get more traffic density than human traffic density in this room. So I'm going to automate a few trains, and JMRI is fully adequate at doing that. However, you're going to have to go buy a computer, install the software, and install Java, deal with the security settings. If you want to do anything other than most basic, you're going to have to put a little bit of energy into this anyway. So at minimum, as opposed to running a full-blown computer, I might recommend that a person consider one of these choices for your JMRI setup. So I don't like having my JMRI system running on a regular computer. Every time you update Windows, it breaks the Java security settings, and you're fighting with Java. Java is kind of painful to deal with under general circumstance, and they're pretty robust. But it's pretty easy. Java is so painful to deal with in the modern era anyway, from security standpoints. And I think JMRI runs better on Linux than anything else. This is a Raspberry Pi sitting behind a 7-inch display. This is all in 75-ish, $80, something in that neighborhood. By the way, the only thing that is running to this right here is an Ethernet wire. The Ethernet wire is powering the whole arrangement. So now I have this one opened up for you. This is the system here in its case. Has a nice little case, so you can set this system, on your dispatcher station or something. Although I would recommend probably using, say larger monitors and displays if you're using it for things beyond Decoder Pro. For example, having a dispatcher obviously operate the system, and it has this nice little case and such. But I've got this one opened up so that you can see the meat and potatoes of this thing. There's really nothing much to this, but it is the display board at a Raspberry Pi. But in my case here, I've added an additional board to it. This is a PoE, or a power over Ethernet. So this board means the whole thing runs off the Ethernet wire. Yes, you've got to have power on your switches, but you could buy PoE switches, get power over Ethernet switches. You could buy PoE switches for $50 on Amazon all day long. And then you have this neat little setup that's nice and compact. Another one of the joys of this arrangement here is that you could buy these boards and place them around the layout. They have a really nice thin lip, so you can integrate it into your fascia, drop it back in, have a nice lip, and it's got a nice finished edge. You can put these around your layout at your fascia and not have to run the JMRI web interface or something that's a bit hokey and slow and tedious to deal with, for example. This can run the full-blown JMRI. And you can have a dozen of these around your layout, each running JMRI and connected back to the central JMRI system. And again, the only thing that's required to feed these things around the layout is a single Ethernet wire and buying a cheap PoE switch to do that. So, and you get the full JMRI experience for your panels that's very responsive from a touch perspective, or could even be the CTC interface. But yes, you've got to do it yourself with this. But I want to open your mind to the fact that this is not just possible, but easy, cheaper, with a range of additional benefits and conveniences that are just not that hard. And it's not like you're having to invent the wheel with this. You're not having to write code, for example. One of the joys of working with Arduino as model railroaders is that so much of the code is already available. That Jeff Buds of MRH fame, and he has a bunch of stuff there on their forums, and Dave Bodnar, who has a great YouTube channel about this stuff, and countless other people have already done the legwork for you. And many of us here are running the DCC++ and now the DCC EX latest generation. Latest generation runs on a new board that has Wi-Fi on board. So my JMRI system now is the equivalent of this with Wi-Fi and this, and they talk over Wi-Fi. It's incredible how simple and lightweight all of this stuff is these days. But many people can build these things. We did a couple part series that was put on by our very own Robert Holloman and Chris Root, and they done a very good job of showcasing how easy it is. I mean, it's literally two little jumper wires and plug it in with USB and update the code. That you don't have to even understand the code whatsoever. Also, you can build these things into a single enclosure. I've took all mine apart so I can show you, but to make it all nice and neat, you can buy these things. These are DN rails that give you a place to mount them, and these little boards that let it mount to DN rails. I'd recommend you consider doing something like that. All of mine are in some types of enclosures like this, wall mount boxes that you can mount all of your electronics in. So you don't have to have a DIY solution that is all laying out on a table with wires run everywhere and a little bit of duct tape and the occasional spark and arc that's happening. But you can get the choice of what to have, and you could buy a commercial DCC system for the core system so that it's a supported product, and then do some other DIY things around that for, maybe your signal system you build yourself and integrate it with DCC or over the Wi-Fi, or maybe you build a crossing gate flasher. But open your mind to the possibilities. Or maybe you do, surround audio for ambient surrounds, ambient sounds. These are for my river system. These things are incredibly easy to do. You'll save a tremendous amount of money. And even beyond the money, all things being equal, you get choice and you get flexibility. You get the ability to do things like this with these panels that would cost you a lot more money, or you'd have to buy little tablets and plug them into your fascia. And cheap tablets, have a pretty short shelf life. They just don't hold up so well in my experience. So, all right, I know that was a very fast take of the stuff that I wanted to show you guys, a real quick take on it. But I wanted to open your mind to things that could be done. One thing that I might, yes, sir.
Ralph is wondering what's at the other end of the switch. I know you said a PoE switch, but isn't there something else that you can get that just applies the power to the Ethernet so you can
Sure.
I can't remember the name of it, but there's a device that just puts power on it.
Yeah, you can buy an injector. I have one of those somewhere around here, but it's just a block that has a data input that goes to your router or switch, and another wire coming out of that is your power line connector. You can even buy injectors that have 4 or 8 ports on them so that you don't have to have a different switch. However, by the time you buy an injector, if it's a solo injector for a single panel, yes, not a problem. That makes sense. But if you're going to do more than 1 or 2 of these things, by the time you buy those devices these days, PoE switches used to be a lot more expensive. These days, PoE switches for $29.99 or $39.99 on Amazon are so incredibly cheap that, but there are multiple ways to skin this cat that makes it easy.
I got a question also, Andy.
Sure.
Can't you do Ethernet over your home power lines and then also inject that power back into the Ethernet cable for your power over the Ethernet?
Okay, so you can do power line networking, yes, to get your network signal over there, but you would still have to you'd have to do power line networking to carry your network signal over your power lines, and then as you bring it off from the power lines, then you'd have to also run it through an injector to get that power on the additional wires. See, an Ethernet wire is 8 conductors. but 100 megabit networking, for example, which is what most of this stuff runs anyway, not gigabit, only uses 4 of those conductors. The other 4 are used for power, or a gigabit for noise canceling and stuff like that. So you need those extra 4 wires to be injected. As an example, if you want to run networking equipment around your railroad or home, we run these 8 conductor wires, but you only need 4 conductors if you're running 100 megabits. So you can make up your wires. Another DIY thing you should do for $13 on Amazon, you can buy you a set of Cat 5 crimps that will crimp RJ45. That'll crimp RJ45s, RJ11s, and RJ12s. RJ12s are what your Loconet are. It's a $13 expense that everybody should have that thing. Don't buy the pre-made cables. Do that yourself. $13, you can make them for a lifetime.
Well, I was just wondering because, some people may not feel comfortable running Cat 5 cable. They're already running all those other wires. They don't want to run Cat 5 cable under their layout too. They could run the Ethernet through their power line, sure, and then split it out and then inject the PoE back into it to power their device.
Well, these things have Wi-Fi already on these devices, so you don't have to run a Cat 5 to that. This has Wi-Fi on board, and you can just plug. I just happen to have the angle in there because I was going to show you those or something, but you just plug USB-C into this device and connect it to Wi-Fi. So if you're not trying to reduce the amount of wires in my case, and just run an Ethernet wire out there, I also like wires on a lot of stuff because it's more reliable. But honestly, wired networking is a lot more expensive when you get a lot of devices. Mm-hmm. I have over 100 Ethernet ports back in my networking switch. That is an extremely expensive amount of gear for you guys to do in a railroad. Wi-Fi is the name of the game because it's so much cheaper unless you're spending a lot of bandwidth. You can buy a single access point. This is an Ubiquiti. I highly recommend it. You can join a couple of these together to make a mesh network. So it's a single network that's broadcast and mesh. So as you move about your house, it will determine which access point is closest. You don't end up with 2 of those. By the way, also, my access points actually broadcast, or it shows up that there are 4 networks here. One for the railroad system, one for guests that are going to participate with the railroad or that want to use the throttle because my railroad is completely isolated, and then my home networking stuff. So there's separate networks for all that stuff. So you could buy these and set up a dedicated railroad SSID or wireless, and also still have your home wireless that are somewhat separated as well. Now this is the Pro model, the higher end model. That is more if you have, say, 300 plus devices. But when you start buying these little ESP01s for $1.50 a piece, and this will throw my turnout for $1.50, full decoder. Tell me a decoder you can buy for $1.50, and this has Wi-Fi on board. I give this thing 5 volts or 3.3 volts. Give this thing some power, connect it to Wi-Fi, add it to JMRI, and I could throw my tortoise or a servo. Of course, I need an additional board for the servo part for $1.50, and it's Wi-Fi. But when you start doing this, and it's so incredibly cheap, you'd be surprised how quickly you add up to a few hundred wireless devices when you've got one of these in the basement of every structure to control some lights and such. So it adds up. And Wi-Fi is cheap. Ubiquiti's worth looking at. Of course, you can catch any of us in the normal nightly because I love talking this chat. But there's a case for some DIY. There's also a case for having a commercially supported product, especially for your primary system, as Ari has chosen. And I think it's potentially right for a whole lot of people to make that decision.
It all boils down to cost. So it all boils down to cost, basically, what you're willing to spend up front.
Well, cost.
And not just that. So, the electronics is a whole subset to the hobby. Mm-hmm. And my focus wasn't, in my young 20s, I was really great at computers. And as I got older and away from them, I don't do a whole lot of computer programming these days. I do a lot with software and specialized programs, but I'm very specialized now. And Andy's very specialized in this. So this is all Andy. This is like anyone that's like Andy is going to love to build their own components.
Speed's another one.
And yeah, absolutely. We got people in our group that this is what they do. This is their jam, and something that Andy didn't mention, a lot of the coding's already commercially available, or it's free. So you can download it and just plug it. And if you want to modify the code, that's like I said, the whole subset of the hobby. If you want to tinker with it and figure out I want to do this. I want to make sure that my flashers work like this. I want to make sure that my signals, sometimes signals is just detection. If you want to make it operate prototypically like a railroad would send it out from a dispatcher station, you can code that in, run it through JMRI, and you have a separate signaling system that's not just based on detection. That's based on, what the dispatcher says. And I might go that way, especially because we got people here that can support me and answer questions, and that might be my next experiment.
Also, all of this stuff is standards based. The beautiful thing is that DCC is a standard, but all these things that I'm showing here are standards based as well. So you can get code and resources, not just from auto railroaders, but from anywhere in the electronic space. You can even go to websites like Fiverr.com is what I can think of, or Fiverr.something. And there's a lot of these. And as an IT guy, I hire contractors all the time for one-off projects. You can go to one of these sites like Fiverr.com, put out a thing that you want done, and you'll have a dozen people say, yeah, I'll charge you $20 and I'll do that. You could throw a $20 bill at some guy or the digital equivalent and have somebody write you a little bit of Arduino code for some unique thing, a scale or whatever that you need. But so much of this is available. And yes, you can get commercial products for this stuff. But as an example, there's a product from a company called Pricom. It's a great looking product for the layout lighting control, for JMRI based layout lighting control. That was going to cost me somewhere in the neighborhood of $800 or $900 to have. Instead, these are about $4 for on and off control. And I bought one that runs on ESP called a Dig Uno for maybe $30 or something that controls my lighting. Yes, cost is one of the considerations. Choice is one of the considerations. But the biggest thing that I want to encourage people is people tend to say it's one way or the other. It's not. By all means, buy a commercial DCC system. Buy a regular computer if you want, and let it sit there and run all day long, sipping at its 90 watts of power when this bad boy is pulling 5 watts or something. That adds up too. So cost is a consideration. Choice is a consideration. But the biggest thing is the choice, the ability to have what you want. And I just want to at least encourage people to open their minds to consider 1 or 2 projects where you don't have to go and write the code, but to where you don't have to go buy something that's already in a beautiful blister pack that has a title on it that's exactly what you want. Buy a more standards-based device and just trick it into doing the thing you want. And, that's another thing. Model Routing Live is here. We have nightly shows all the time. We're all in the nightly chats all the time. And a lot of us are already, pretty dyed-in-the-wool geeks. So, all right, guys. Anything else? We run over a couple minutes anyway.
It's also nice, like when you go to bed and you hear your trains running, and you're like, oh, I'll get on my phone, power off, boom, done.
Yep. Or a whole lot of us have the smart home. Robert has the, Alexa, turn my layout on stuff. I know I just messed with a whole bunch of people's houses. I'm really sorry. I didn't think about that. You got to be smart like that. But that's easy too.
That's one of our running gags in the group.
These are HomeKit and the Amazon system controllable as well. So it's a joy to have those choices. And we've got used to them in every other part of our life, but our railroads have largely stayed, in the past. And DCC has all this capability, but it hasn't really come of age. Exactly. It hasn't. We've not seen a significant advancement in DCC, except for these few nuances like, the proto throttle, which I love this thing. I'm a super fan. I'm not getting any kickback. I don't have any 10% code to give you guys that'll get you a deal. There's no sponsorship here. I I just love the product. So regardless. All right. So I know we got, these are fairly quick shows. If you guys have any questions for us, of course, you could comment below this YouTube video. You could send us an email to any one of us, just our first name at modelroundinglive.com, or you can send an email to empires@modelroundinglive.com, and we'll, all get a chance. We can answer the question in the next show or reply more directly to it. Otherwise, we'll see you guys again in 2 weeks. Johnny, what shows do we have coming up between now and the next Empire show? Can you give us a skinny on that? All right. So December 16th. All right. Yeah. Who's Big Bill talking to with my Budfather is going to be December 9th. Good stuff. All right. Looking forward to that one. Got to be in the chat to kind of razz those guys for that one. So everybody should be looking forward to that one. Otherwise, we'll see you guys back here again Saturday in 2 weeks. Different group of guys. We're jumping around back and forth a little bit, but you guys will get the hang of what we're doing with this season. I know we run slightly long, but I think this was pretty good stuff. So, but of course, I think so. So thanks for joining us. You guys have a great night.
Have a good night, everybody.